What happened when an undercover CEO stepped into his own failing hospital? Nathan Cole had built his healthcare network on compassion, efficiency, and trust. But when reports surfaced about delayed care, overworked staff, and a toxic leader running the ER, he knew something was wrong. Instead of relying on secondhand reports, he went undercover as a new hospital administrator to see the truth for himself. What he discovered was worse than he imagined. Neglected patients, burned-out doctors, and a system that put profits over people. Could he fix the damage before lives were lost? Stay tuned for a powerful story of leadership and redemption. Dr. Nathan Cole sat in his office at Riverside General, his fingers drumming against the wooden desk as he scanned yet another patient complaint. It was the same pattern: delayed emergency care, rude staff, overworked nurses, and patients left waiting for hours. The hospital, once known for quality and compassionate care, had become a frustrating, bureaucratic machine, prioritizing cost-cutting over saving lives. The worst reports came from the emergency department, ED, where complaints about neglect, long wait times, and unprofessional conduct had tripled over the last year. Patients who should have received immediate care were being ignored or sent home too soon, leading to avoidable complications, suffering, and even death. Nathan had spent years building this hospital's reputation, following in his father's footsteps, ensuring it remained a pillar of healthcare for the community. But now he barely recognized it. Nathan had confronted Dr. Marcus Hayes, the chief resident of the ED, multiple times, demanding answers. But Marcus always had an excuse. "Patients exaggerate," he'd say dismissively. "We do what we can with the staff we have. If people don't like it, they can go elsewhere." Nathan knew better. Hospitals weren't supposed to turn people away, especially not one bearing his family's name. But without solid proof, Marcus and the hospital administrators would keep dodging responsibility. Nathan had a choice. He could issue another memo, schedule another useless meeting, or trust secondhand reports from administrators who clearly weren't invested. Or he could see the truth for himself. If he wanted to understand what was really happening in the ED, he had to experience it firsthand. So, for the first time in years, he set aside his title, his office, and his authority. With a new name, a fake backstory, and a first-year intern's badge, he would step into the chaotic world of the ER not as Dr. Nathan Cole, the respected hospital director, but as Dr. Nate Collins, a nervous new recruit. Adjusting his glasses, he took a deep breath and made his way toward the emergency department. Whatever was happening behind those doors, he was about to find out firsthand. Dr. Nathan Collins stepped through the automatic doors of Riverside General's emergency department, immediately hit by the overwhelming smell of antiseptic, sweat, and stress. The waiting room was packed, patients slumped in chairs, some holding on to loved ones, others staring at the flickering TV that no one was really watching. The air was thick with frustration and exhaustion, both from the patients and the medical staff. A nurse at the front desk barely looked up from her computer before muttering, "Take a seat if it's not life-threatening." Nathan had expected chaos. It was an ER after all, but what he saw was beyond unacceptable. A young woman cradling a crying toddler had been waiting for hours, her eyes red with exhaustion. An elderly man in a wheelchair clutched his chest, his breathing ragged, yet no one had checked on him in at least 30 minutes. A teenage boy with a blood-soaked bandage around his arm stared blankly ahead, ignored despite his obvious pain. This wasn't just inefficiency, this was neglect. Before he could process it further, a voice barked behind him. "Who the hell are you?" Nathan turned to see Dr. Marcus Hayes, arms crossed, eyes sharp with irritation. Marcus had an air of authority mixed with indifference, his lab coat pristine despite the chaos unfolding around him. "Dr. Nate Collins," Nathan answered, keeping his voice level. "New intern." Marcus snorted, unimpressed. "Great, another one." He turned, walking briskly down the hall. "Try not to get in the way." Nathan followed, catching glimpses of the disorganized mess that was the ER. A nurse struggled to reset a broken IV, her patient wincing in pain. A doctor flipped through paperwork at the nurse's station, shaking his head at a chart filled with contradictions. Nearby, an orderly cleaned up vomit while an exasperated nurse snapped at a patient asking for help. They reached the main workspace, a cluttered, dimly lit area where monitors beeped in protest. Marcus turned sharply, facing Nathan. "Listen up. This place isn't med school, and no one's got time to hold your hand. Stay out of my way, do what I tell you, and don't get attached. Patients come and go, and some don't make it. You can't save everyone, so don't bother trying. Nathan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a bad night, it was a broken system. If this was how the man in charge thought, how many lives had already slipped through the cracks? One thing was certain. He was in for a long, painful truth about his hospital. Nathan didn't have to wait long to see just how deep the dysfunction at Riverside General ran. The first few hours of his shift were a whirlwind of beeping monitors, ringing phones, and urgent shouts. But what struck him wasn't just the chaos. It was the exhaustion written on every staff member's face. Doctors dragged their feet, nurses exchanged weary glances, and the receptionists barely looked up when speaking to patients. This wasn't the high-energy ER he had imagined. It was a place drained of its spirit. As he shadowed Dr. Marcus Hayes, Nathan saw how bad things really were. A gunshot victim was wheeled in, bleeding heavily, but instead of immediate action, the staff hesitated, glancing at Marcus, who sighed before finally nodding. Put him in exam 3. If he's stable, he waits. Nathan clenched his jaw. Wait? Every second counted in trauma cases, but here, treatment was determined by how much staff could handle, not by urgency. Nathan moved through the ER, noting the staggering patient load. Some hallway beds were occupied for hours, with no one checking in. Nurses sped past patients, avoiding eye contact because they had no answers to give. One nurse, Jenny, was attempting to handle 3 different cases at once, flipping between charts, IVs, and panicked relatives. Nathan stepped forward to help a patient struggling to sit up, but a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Don't," a tired voice muttered. Nathan turned to see Dr. Owen Carter, another attending physician, with deep bags under his eyes. "They'll expect you to do everything if you start helping," Owen warned. "And trust me, no one here has time for a hero." Nathan looked around, his frustration mounting. This wasn't a hospital, it was a battlefield, and the staff had already lost. The senior doctors barely stepped in, leaving nurses to fend for themselves. Equipment was outdated, files were misplaced, and even life-saving medications were being rationed because supply chains were mismanaged. Then there was Marcus Hayes, the man supposedly in charge, leaning against a counter, sipping coffee while scrolling through his phone. When a code blue was called in room 4, Marcus barely reacted, only moving when a nurse urgently tapped his arm. He strolled toward the emergency like it was a minor inconvenience, while other doctors rushed past him in a panic. Nathan's chest tightened. How many lives had been lost due to this negligence? The doctors weren't just overworked, they had given up. And if things continued this way, it was only a matter of time before someone died right in front of him. Nathan had seen enough warning signs, but the breaking point came faster than he expected, and it was almost fatal. It started with a young girl, no older than 7, rushed into the ER by her frantic mother. The girl's lips were pale, her breathing shallow, and her tiny fingers curled weakly around her mother's sleeve. She's not waking up properly," the woman choked out. "Please, someone help her." Nathan moved forward, but Dr. Marcus Hayes barely glanced up from his clipboard. "Vitals?" he asked flatly, already scribbling something down. "Blood pressure's dropping," Nurse Jenny responded quickly. "She's in shock. We don't have time to run every test for every kid with a fever," Marcus interrupted with a sigh. He waved a hand lazily. "It's probably just dehydration. Hook up some fluids, let her rest. Next." Nathan froze, his gut telling him this was wrong. The girl wasn't just dehydrated. Something was seriously wrong, but Marcus had already moved on, and the rest of the staff, overworked, burned out, just followed his orders. Minutes passed. The girl lay motionless, the IV barely improving her condition. Then her body jerked violently. Alarms blared. Jenny gasped as the girl's heart monitor flatlined for half a second before spiking erratically. The mother screamed. "Code blue," someone shouted. Nathan acted on instinct, pushing past the frozen nurses. "She's going into cardiac arrest. She needs epinephrine and a crash cart now." For a brief, horrifying moment, no one moved. The hesitation was suffocating. It wasn't until Nathan grabbed the defibrillator himself that the room finally jolted into action. He pressed the paddles to her chest, voice sharp. "Clear!" A jolt of electricity surged through her tiny frame. The heart monitor beeped once, then twice, then steady. The relief was suffocating, but Nathan's anger burned beneath it. Marcus finally appeared beside him, face twisted in annoyance. "You went against my call." Nathan rounded on him. "She was in septic shock, not dehydrated. If we had waited any longer, she'd be dead." Marcus scoffed. "You can't save everyone." Nathan's blood boiled. "No, but we're supposed to damn well try." Silence filled the room. The staff, usually too afraid to speak up, looked at each other, and then at Marcus. For the first time, Nathan saw doubt flicker in their exhausted eyes. This wasn't just a mistake. This was negligence, and it almost cost a child her life. Something had to change, now. Nathan had seen enough. The near-fatal mistake with the young girl had confirmed everything he suspected. This hospital was broken. It wasn't just understaffed or overworked. It was corrupt, indifferent, and dangerous. And now, it was time to stop pretending. The next morning, Nathan walked into the ER with a different energy. He wasn't just another overworked doctor trying to survive his shift. He was Nathan Carter, CEO of Mercy Hill Medical, and it was time to confront the truth. He strode straight into Dr. Marcus Hayes' office, slamming the door behind him. Marcus, who had been leaning back in his chair, lazily scrolling through his phone, barely looked up. "Something you need, rookie?" Marcus muttered. Nathan ripped off his hospital ID and threw it onto Marcus's desk. "Not a rookie," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Nathan Carter, CEO." Marcus froze. His eyes flicked from Nathan's face to the ID, then back again. His usual arrogance faltered. "Wait, what?" "I went undercover because of reports about this hospital failing its patients," Nathan continued. "And after what I saw last night, I don't need any more proof. This place isn't failing because of underfunding or staffing shortages. It's failing because of you." Marcus scoffed, sitting up straighter, but there was a hint of nervousness in his posture now. "That's ridiculous," he said, forcing a laugh. "I've been running this ER for 10 years. You think you know better because you spent a few shifts playing the hero?" "I think I know enough," Nathan shot back. He tossed a thick folder onto the desk. "Here's what I've found. Patients waiting hours for urgent care, nurses being forced to work double shifts while you sit here doing nothing. Life-threatening misdiagnoses. And let's not forget special treatment for VIP patients while people in real need are ignored." Marcus's face darkened. "That's how hospitals survive, Carter. You think money falls from the sky? Those VIPs keep the doors open." Nathan's stomach turned. At the cost of actual lives? Marcus leaned forward, regaining some of his smug confidence. "You can't fire me. I've got friends on the board, people who like the way I run things." Nathan gave a small, tight smile. "Funny you mention that." He turned toward the door and pushed it open. Outside, half the ER staff was standing there. Nurses, doctors, admin workers, all of them had heard every word. And behind them, 2 men in suits. Representatives from the hospital board. Marcus's smirk vanished. Nathan stepped aside. They'd been listening the whole time. The room went silent. Marcus's face paled as the board members stepped inside. One of them, a stern-looking man with gray hair, folded his arms. "Dr. Hayes, we need to talk." Marcus stood abruptly, his bravado gone. "This is a misunderstanding." Nathan turned to the staff. "You deserve better than this." His voice was steady. "And starting today, you're going to get it." For the first time since arriving at Mercy Hill, Nathan saw something in their eyes that had been missing for a long time. Hope. With Dr. Marcus Hayes removed from his position, the toxic leadership that had poisoned Mercy Hill ER was finally gone. But Nathan knew that removing one man wouldn't be enough. The real work was just beginning. Trust had been broken not just between the staff and administration, but also between the hospital and the community it was meant to serve. If Mercy Hill was going to recover, it needed more than a new name on the leadership board. It needed a complete culture shift. Nathan spent the following days on the ground, working side by side with the staff. He sat in on morning briefings, spoke to nurses and doctors about their concerns, and restructured policies to prioritize patient care over bureaucracy. The first major change? Staffing improvements. No more back-to-back shifts with no relief. He worked with HR to bring in more nurses, ensuring that no one was stretched so thin they could barely function. The next priority was equipment and efficiency. Nathan ordered a full audit of medical supplies, replacing outdated machines and restocking essentials. Outdated triage policies that had let VIPs skip the line were eliminated. Every patient is a priority, he reminded the staff. No more favoritism. But the biggest change came in morale. For the first time in years, the ER staff felt heard. Nurses who had been ignored under Marcus now had a voice in decision-making. Team meetings became discussions instead of lectures. A new mentorship program was implemented, where senior staff guided new hires, ensuring they had the support they needed instead of being thrown into chaos. One afternoon, as Nathan walked through the ER, he overheard two nurses talking. "Feels different here, doesn't it?" one said. "Yeah," the other nodded. "Feels better." Nathan allowed himself a small smile. The ER wasn't perfect yet, but for the first time in a long time, it was healing. A few weeks after his removal, Dr. Marcus Hayes returned to Mercy Hill ER not as the head of the department, but as a man seeking redemption. The once arrogant doctor who had ruled with intimidation now stood at the entrance, uncertainty written all over his face. Nathan noticed him immediately. The tension among the staff was palpable. Many of them still resented him, and a few nurses exchanged wary glances, unsure why he had come back. Marcus took a slow breath and stepped forward. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he admitted, his voice lacking the usual sharpness. "But I need to make things right." Nathan studied him, considering his words carefully. He knew that redemption wasn't earned through words, it was proven through action. "You want a second chance?" Nathan asked, crossing his arms. "Then start at the bottom. No special privileges, no authority. You'll shadow the residents, take direction from the same staff you once dismissed, and prove that you've changed." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." That day, Marcus put on scrubs, not as a department head, but as a doctor who had lost everything. The first shift was humbling. He assisted with basic tasks, took orders from nurses, and spent more time listening than talking. As the shift neared its end, a young nurse hesitantly approached him. "Dr. Hayes?" she said cautiously. "Thanks for helping today." Marcus met her gaze and gave a small nod. It was a start. He had a long way to go, but for the first time, he was taking the right steps. Nathan stood at the entrance of Mercy Hill ER, watching the night shift transition in. The air inside the hospital felt different now, lighter, more purposeful. The changes he had implemented were not just policy adjustments, but a cultural shift. Doctors and nurses communicated better, patient care was prioritized, and the fear-driven leadership that once plagued the department was gone. It hadn't been easy, and there was still work to do, but for the first time in years, the ER was becoming a place where patients came for healing and staff felt valued. Marcus, now a humbled physician, was slowly earning back the trust of his colleagues. He had embraced his role as a learner rather than a ruler, proving through action rather than words that he was committed to change. Nathan had been skeptical at first, but over time, Marcus showed true growth, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. Redemption in medicine wasn't about pride, it was about doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Beyond the ER, Nathan knew that leadership in healthcare wasn't about power or control. It was about service. Titles and authority meant nothing if the people behind them didn't understand the responsibility that came with saving lives. A hospital functioned best when those at the top stood beside their teams, listened, and led with integrity. As he walked through the halls, Nathan paused at a patient's bedside, checking in with an elderly woman waiting for discharge. She smiled, thanking him for the care she had received. Moments like this made everything worth it. When Nathan had gone undercover, he had hoped to find the truth. What he found instead was purpose. And as long as he had a say in it, Mercy Hill ER would never lose its way again. The story of Mercy Hill ER teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the importance of ethical responsibility in healthcare. Nathan's journey from CEO to undercover doctor reveals that true leadership isn't about authority, it's about service. He discovered that when management loses sight of compassion and integrity, it's not just morale that suffers, but lives are put at risk. One of the biggest takeaways is that fear-based leadership leads to dysfunction. Under Marcus's rule, the ER operated under stress, silence, and fear, creating an environment where mistakes went unreported, patients were overlooked, and the staff felt abandoned. Nathan's intervention proved that respect, teamwork, and proper leadership create a more efficient and compassionate workplace. Another lesson is that redemption is possible through action, not words. Marcus's downfall came from arrogance, but his path to redemption came through humility and effort. True leaders recognize their mistakes and work to correct them. Ultimately, this story is a reminder that healthcare is about people, not numbers. The best hospitals aren't the ones with the best profits. They're the ones where every patient matters, every staff member is valued, and every leader stands for what's right.